Fettuccine Alfredo is one of the most creamy and craveable pasta dishes there is, but sometimes its richness can be a little overwhelming. And that's why in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a super creamy version of chicken Alfredo, but with a couple small twists to make it brighter in flavor and a tad lower in calories. That way we could spend less time experiencing food guilt and more time enjoying every bite of that delicious Alfredo. The first thing we'll need to address is the uneven thickness of the chicken breast. Place the chicken in between a sheet of parchment paper or plastic wrap, and then pound it using a heavy bottom pot until the chicken is relatively even in thickness. You only need to use moderate pressure and let the weight of the pot do most of the work. When the chicken is even in thickness, season both sides with kosher salt, freshly ground black pepper, and then rub the outside of the chicken down with a little bit of high heat olive oil. You can cook the chicken now as is, but if you want to maximize its flavor, dry brine it in the fridge for a minimum of 2 hours or up to a day in advance. For the pasta, we're just going to keep it simple with pre-made dry pasta. You can go with the classic fettuccine, but if you want something that is closer to homemade fresh pasta, then an egg noodle pappardelle is really great as well. Regardless of whatever pasta you decide to go with, try to find one that is slow dried, and a keyword to look out for is bronze die cut. De Seco is known for making quality pasta that doesn't break the bank and is well worth the added cost over a cheaper store brand pasta. To boil the pasta, we're going to want to use about 2 quarts of water for every 8 ounces of dry pasta. Using less water is going to help concentrate the starch from the pasta, and this is going to be crucial to helping us emulsify the sauce later. When the water comes up to a boil, season it with 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, or about 5 grams for every 1,000 milliliters of water. Add in your pasta and stir it occasionally as it cooks. And because we're using less water, it's likely that it's going to take longer to cook than what it says on the back of the package, but just cook your pasta until it's tender. Choose whatever pot or skillet you plan on cooking the Alfredo sauce in and preheat it over medium heat. Here I add in some olive oil, and it's a little too much, and you're going to see exactly why that is later. When your pan is hot enough that the oil is shimmering, lay in the chicken breast and just leave it alone for a couple of minutes. The chicken breast will naturally release itself from the pan when a crust is formed on the outside. After a couple minutes, you can pry on the edge of the chicken to see how the crust is coming along, and when side one has a crust, you can flip it over. Now you can see exactly why I wish I used less oil. I probably could have gotten a better crust if there wasn't so much oil in the pan. Cook it on side 2 until the thickest part of the chicken reads an internal temperature of 160 Fahrenheit. After removing the chicken from the heat, cover it with foil to keep it warm while we prepare the sauce. Remove any leftover oil that is still in the pan, and when most of it has been removed, turn the heat back on to medium. Add in 300 grams of heavy cream and scrape down any fond that was left in the pan. Then add in 10 grams of cornstarch, some freshly ground black pepper, a dash of dried thyme, and the secret ingredient that is going to brighten the flavor of this dish and help cut through all of the richness is going to be some lemon zest. You'll need roughly 2 teaspoons, which is about 80% of a small lemon. And instead of chopping up fresh garlic, I think garlic powder works a lot better here, and it certainly is easier. You'll only need a small amount, around 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon. When all of the ingredients have been added, whisk the sauce continuously until it thickens. For anyone wondering, I decided to leave out the butter because in my opinion, butter adds unnecessary richness and calories. And by increasing the amount of starch, we can leave out the butter and still have an emulsified sauce. When the sauce is thickened, reduce the heat to low, and when the pasta is finished cooking, reserve at least a cup of pasta water before draining it. You're not going to use all of it, but it's definitely better to have extra than not enough. And the starchy pasta water is what's going to help keep the sauce silky smooth and emulsified. Add some of the pasta water to the sauce, around 1/4 cup or so, to loosen it up. Whenever adding pasta water to any sauce, it's important to do so gradually so it can emulsify into the sauce and to prevent the sauce from being thinned out too much. After the sauce has been thinned out a little, add in 230 grams of freshly grated Parmesan cheese. When looking at it from a volume perspective, it seems like a ton of cheese. I mean, it's literally a mountain of Parmesan, but trust me, you're going to use all of it. And you really want to stay away from the pre-grated stuff as it contains cellulose, which is going to prevent the cheese from fully melting into the sauce. And since most of the flavor in the sauce is coming from the cheese, this would be one of those times where you'd want to splurge out on Parmigiano Reggiano, one of the finest Italian cheeses. Whisk the cheese until all of it is fully emulsified into the sauce. And it's important that you never stop stirring because otherwise the cheese could overheat. And if the cheese overheats, the oil is going to release from the cheese and you're going to end up with a greasy pasta. And no one likes greasy pasta. And another thing, don't have the heat too high either, because what happens if the cheese gets too hot? That's right, greasy pasta. So be careful and keep the heat low. When most of the cheese has started to melt, slowly stream in some of the pasta water to loosen up the sauce. Don't add a bunch of water all at once, otherwise you could break the emulsion. In total, I added around 3/4 of a cup of pasta water, and the sauce should still be creamy enough that it drips off the whisk. Also, keep in mind that the sauce is going to loosen up a little further when you add in the pasta. When satisfied with the sauce's consistency, add in the chicken from earlier. You can cut the chicken into strips if you'd like, but I really think small bite-sized pieces are best. And now even with the foil, the chicken has likely cooled off a lot by the time the sauce is finished, so adding it in now is going to help reheat it. When the chicken has been in the pan for a minute or two, add in the drained pasta and toss until all of the noodles are well coated in the sauce. It might seem like there's a lot of sauce now, but after a couple minutes, you'll see just how much those noodles soak up the sauce. If your sauce is still too thick after adding in the pasta, then you can thin it out with a touch of pasta water. And before serving, you can taste for salt and adjust if necessary, but I find between the Parmesan and the salty pasta water that the dish is seasoned perfectly. And before we dig in, I think it'd be wrong not to add in some steamed broccoli to help balance out such a calorie-dense meal. If you were wondering why in the world I'm wearing an oven mitt to hold a plate, it's because I preheated my plates in the oven at 170 Fahrenheit for a few minutes. Like most of you probably already know, creamy pasta dishes like Fettuccine Alfredo are only good for a few minutes, and then it starts to become less enjoyable as it cools. By preheating your plates, you can keep the pasta in that sweet spot temperature for longer. And if your plates are not oven safe, you can run them under hot water until they're warm. It's an extra step, but it really makes this amazing pasta so much more enjoyable. The lemon zest really cuts through all of the richness and makes this Alfredo taste so much better. It's different, but I know that I'm never going to make Alfredo again without it.